Test. Let's stop it right now. Close it out. in their house. You need to, is this chicken not good? You know, how many is that good? Take a year. All right, I don't care, you can start.
Good morning, Jim. Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
And now that the heat's on, speaker's soft. Jim, we're fixing the audio.
Oh,
Could you
I
talk
can hear you just fine.
say something more to us, Jim?
Oh, welcome.
Okay.
Hi, everybody from Texas.
Jim's in Texas now. So the heat keeps kicking on, Jim, just to let you know. And when it does, it's like right behind us and then we can't hear a thing, but hopefully it's not going to be a problem anymore.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember that well.
Oh, geez. Marcy, we got to put our coats back on.
Yeah. Well, but I have two dogs here. So if they start barking, we're kind of in tight quarters right now.
Our historic buildings sometimes flummox us.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to call us to order while I find my agenda, which is not here. All right, I'm going to wing it. I'm calling us to order. It is 8:30 something, 8:32. And I want to make note before we do public comment. Thank you. I want to make note of some agenda changes if this is acceptable to everyone. Jim has just landed in Texas yesterday, I think. The movers arrived this morning at his house in an hour. So we have an hour with Jim to speak with him. So as a result, what I'd like to do is push all the status reports, financial report, all the update things to the back of the agenda and ask Jim to do the items with his name next to them first. And then we'll take the council work session discussion next so that if we have direction to give Jim, we can do that. Is that acceptable to everyone? Yes, Farley.
I was just going to make the motion to
Modify
the agenda
Thank you.
with your suggestions.
And a second from Barb. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. With that, I'll ask for public comment. And just to let all of you out there in the world know, we can't see if we have more participants right now. At least I can't because I'm not that technically proficient. So you'll have to make yourself known to us. Are there any public comments at this time? Yeah, John. Councilman Shada is with us, so come and join us.
Good morning on this somewhat chilly morning here. Ann and I came in the room here and we were smelling the bananas over in the corner, or she spotted the Coke and bananas. I'm here because we had a discussion in our council meeting. And I made the ask to some of you who were at the meeting, and I'm coming today to ask in person also to some of you who weren't here, that I noticed that you had about $876,000, $26 in your checking account. And given the fact that the city is coming up on our capital season and that I have one of the little duties of running some of our electronic stuff for our meetings. So I have what kind of like Ann, my fingers in spreadsheets. And the last time I calculated things, we had about $12.2 million worth of capital needs. In any one cycle, we've been lucky to have maybe 2 million something, 2.3, something like that. I don't have that number right in front of me. So I had asked, and I'm going to ask again this morning, that somebody be brave enough to make the motion to return about $850,000 out of your account back to the city's general fund, so that basically by October 1st, our staff can prepare our packets and that we could maybe see that additional bump in our capital allocation cycle. And that would just be, I think that was my request from Tuesday night, if I recall. And so I'm just repeating it again. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer those. Thank you.
Yes, John.
I have a question. What's the general city fund balance?
The general city fund balance, those are numbers that our staff is working on right now. Okay. But I don't know exactly what that is. Okay. Those numbers in terms of when the big, huge, giant budget book comes out, I'm sure they're in the back offices right now, folding, spindling, and mutilating the budget book so that we have those things. I'm just letting you know that typically speaking, okay, we carry about a 20% contingency, sometimes higher than that. I think that's also something that you guys ought to think about, which is that, and this kind of goes beyond my comments that I made on Tuesday night, which is that that's sort of kind of the fund that I think the city does dip into when there are items that come up. But what I would like to do is sort of kind of corral all the funds that in the community into one place, so elected officials here could go through and allocate those funds as needed. Thank you.
Well, I'd make a couple of comments. First of all, I believe the fund balance is in the $8 million range, maybe more than that now. And to me, it would be more appropriate when you do your capital budgeting session to look at the needs in the urban renewal area and then ask that we spend the 800,000 or whatever the appropriate number might be on a selected capital project within the urban renewal area, because there are needs there as well as other places in the city. So I'm not opposed to spending money. I guess I'm opposed to just throwing it into the general fund where it may be used for O&M.
Yes, Marcy.
I'm wondering about the legality of all of this. I don't know, Anne, if you have some background in that.
You know,
I think we are going to cover this
We are.
in probably more structured way in a bit. So
Yes.
I think it would be best to just let this go right now as a comment.
Right. Thank you very much for hearing me. And so I'll sit down and listen to the rest of the comments. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. With that, Jim, I'm going to move to the old business item that is yours, which is the status of the LaFun project, and then ask you to do your executive director report, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Just one question before I do that. I can't see you guys all that well. It's a real small box on my screen. So are there any board members that are missing?
No, we're all here.
Oh, okay, great. I'll make a note of that.
That's right. We're physically here.
Okay. All right. So as far as on the LaFon, kind of unchanged. I've had a conversation with one prospective grocery store tenant. They had a bunch of questions, particularly about the site and financing and that type of thing. So we had a good conversation. It was very positive. They're not willing yet to make a commitment. They're still kind of crunching their numbers. They have other stores in the metro area. And they're concerned about maybe possibly cannibalizing users that are currently going to those stores. by opening a store in Manitou. I kind of assured them that that probably wasn't the case, that they really have a separate market here. So anyhow, they're still considering it, but it's good that he actually reached out to me. So it shows that they're very interested yet. So anyhow, that's kind of where they are at this point. What else we have going on there? That's about the site. Nothing has really changed, and they are still looking to see if they can find. Paragon is still looking to see if there's a potential for maybe like a kiosk type coffee store, like a Dutch Brothers. That's not one that's being considered, but something of that order. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And that's about it as far as LaFon's going.
And then are there any questions about that?
Jim, just a comment. This is Barb. It would seem to be on the grocery store topic, it would seem to be a suitable size site, possibly for one of those smaller Walmart shopping stores.
Neighborhood market.
The neighborhood markets. And I just wondered, have you or Paragon reached as largely as to Walmart on that concept?
Barb, I really can't speak about that because it starts to tell you kind of, you can narrow it down who we're talking to. And there is a non-disclosure agreement.
Then I would just suggest that it includes larger entities than perhaps just local merchants, and perhaps that's what you were speaking to.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Jim? Let's move to your executive director report.
Okay. So I did remotely attend the council meeting on the 12th. I think you're going to have a very interesting discussion about that in a minute, so I won't go into details. This monthly coordination with Denise, city administration, we always meet monthly. So we did that. There was no real major things. We did talk about a couple potential projects in the area. One being the Martin property. And I've been in contact with Jerry Trent and also one potential owner. And I believe, and Debbie may have more information on this than I do right now, that they were actually planning on making an offer on that building. So there is somebody that's extremely interested in that, and I'll defer to Debbie because she knows more. But there's been some activity. People are interested in the building. I think a lot of folks that had looked at it thought it was beyond their reach as far as financials. So, but I think this one now is interested. So we'd like to see some activity there. And I would suspect that maybe they'd even want to apply for a facade or site improvement grant. So that would be good. And I did meet with one city council prospective candidate who seemed to be very positive about urban renewal. So that's kind of the activities, other than, getting myself physically moved.
Questions for Jim? I'll just close out his report by saying that, in fact, there is a contract on the Martin property now. And the realtor contacted me. It is a local merchant who's purchased the property, and they are in contact with Jim and do want to do some improvements beyond just opening in the building. Just to refresh everybody's memory, the garage is what we all see, but there are apartments inside the facility as well. And I believe that the owner intends to rehab those and rent them, which would be a tiny dent in our affordable housing issue or lack of housing in general. So I thought that was a really positive development, and the fact that they've been in contact with Jim without any guarantees of our participation, purchased the property anyway. So hopefully we'll have news to share in the coming months about the scope of their improvements and how we could participate. John, do you have a comment or question?
I do have a comment. I'm curious in the discussions that both you, Debbie, and you, Jim, have had with the realtor and prospective user on the Martin property, if the easement for the pedestrian bridge has come up.
No,
I
we
could
did not
ask
actually speak about that.
also if that was discussed with the city's purchase of a portion of the Martin property, because that would have been a very appropriate time to include the easement in the purchase discussions. And I don't think anybody from council talked to anybody on the URA about that. And it's a line item in our budget. So it looks like a major oversight to me on the part of the council or city administration.
Jim, can you comment about your conversation with the property owner and the issue of the easement?
No, there was no discussion on that right now. It was really preliminary discussions about whether or not they could even afford to buy the property and what was available from the URA, if anything. And so, I explained to them how TIF works and that, they would have to generate obviously an increase in value to generate any new property tax. And the sales tax, I said, that's kind of in limbo. Certainly wouldn't be beyond if the use was really good and the city really liked it, going back to city council and asking them if they wanted to do something like that, and would they be willing, if this project generates any sales tax, to contribute any of that. And, I think I just kind of gave them that idea. Obviously, I think we'll have this discussion about the council meeting, but I think something like that was probably going to have to be included in an IGA that we have developed with council at some point as to what latitude the URA has. So anyhow, but no, the discussion about the easement, I think that's something we need to bring up soon. I kind of doubt it be a problem with this particular guy, but I will circle back around on that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions about that? Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the council work session. And I just want to give you a structure for this because a lot of stuff has transpired and we do have this request to return the majority of our funds to the city. So I want to tell you how I'd like to proceed about this. I'd like to give a brief synopsis of what happened at the work session. I've asked Anne to do some research about not only our balance, but also the city's funds so that we have an understanding about where we sit with respect to the city and our past history of either returning funds or agreeing not to accept our sales tax share from the city in times of crisis. And then I'd like to have a discussion with all of you about how we want to proceed given what we've heard. Okay. So as you all know, we've been in 3 work sessions now to discuss the memo that John Graham put together in May or late April, which described some ways to proceed with the URA in the future, including closing the URA, shutting down the URA, or expanding, or doing something different. The outcome of the meeting on Tuesday, the work session on Tuesday, the direction to the staff was that Denise, how the city administrator go to their attorney, the city's attorney, and ask some very specific questions about whether or not the city could, number one, withhold the property tax from us or take the property tax. And number two, whether or not it was legal for us to return funds from our account from our entity back to the city. And so she was directed to do those two things and also to explore, I believe with Jeff, the idea of having an IGA and come back with a kind of a framework or a summary of what a proposed IGA would look like. An intergovernmental agreement. We've been sort of interchanging terms between a memorandum of understanding and an intergovernmental agreement. My understanding is that an IGA is the more correct term to use because we are a different governmental entity than the city of Colorado Springs. So as a result, we should be, sort of interacting in that way, especially if funds are involved. So that was the outcome. But I also want to make a few comments about the discussion that we had because we did not comment at the meeting. By the time we were asked to weigh in, it was pretty clear that the council knew which direction they were going to take. And it didn't seem to me that we were going to be able to correct the record without a whole lot more discussion and debate that seemed unnecessary. So I just wanted an opportunity to say on our record, a couple of things about what I heard, at least in that council work session. The first thing that I heard was that it is impossible for city councilors to tell how the pot tax, tell their constituents how the pot tax has been spent because much or most of it has been spent by us. So that's one thing that I've asked Ann to investigate and tell us about because in fact, I don't believe that that's true. In fact, it's my recollection from the conversations and the information that we've seen from the city that the city actually spends about 2/3 of the marijuana tax proceeds because of the taxing structure that they've put in place, and that we receive about 1/3 of those funds, and that many of those funds we've in fact returned to the city or they've been withheld from us over the years. So we'll talk about that in a minute. The second thing that I heard at the meeting was that it was the city that really stopped crime at the LaFun because they shut down the business. And that there was no ongoing crime once the business was shut, but the building still stood. And we know, because we've had conversations with Chief Otto, that that is in fact not true. In fact, the fires that occurred, there were 2 of them, did not occur until the buildings were empty, but not secured by the property owner. And that there was ongoing crime that did not abate until the buildings were fully demolished. So, and the police department has said that. So I'm concerned that there is an inference out there that the URA isn't taking care of blight in the area by doing our job, and one of which is to demolish abandoned structures, which is what we did. The third thing that I heard is that we somehow did not have standing agreements with all the other tax entities for the property tax share from the other taxing districts in the URA, that somehow we had just taken their funds. And nothing could be farther from the truth. In fact, when the URA was constituted back in 2006, the city council at that time was required to have agreements with every taxing entity that that talked about why we were doing what we were doing. So those agreements, in fact, are in place. That's exactly why El Paso County takes the property tax funds in the URA and directs them to our account specifically and not to the city, because we hold those agreements. The city does not. So those property tax revenues are to be spent for the purposes that we were chartered to implement. And that's just the way it is. Now, the law has changed since then. There are some new rules in place. It's one of the things that is concerning to us if we were to make any changes to the current URA, because we would have to go back and basically redo all of these agreements, add additional players to the table. It sort of changes the conversation for us. So the final thing, and this is just a comment on my part, Julie Wolf, a couple of times, Counselor Wolf said during the meeting that there is a sign at the Dillon Motel that references the URA because the Dillon Motel has been put back on the market. The Maggie's Farm owners had it under contract for a year. They've released that option, or not under contract, but they had an option to buy. They released that option. So there is a for sale sign now on the property. So I've driven and walked the property and I can't find any reference to the URA at all. All I know is that it's back up for sale, and we were told that by the Maggie's Farm owner that in fact they had released their option and that they thought the property was going to go back on the market, which it has done. So those are the things that I heard, and I just wanted to say on the record what I think the more accurate story is. And with that, before I ask Ann to speak, if there's anything else that any of you want to say about what transpired at the meeting, things that you heard, this would be the time to do it. And if not, then I'm going to ask Ann to sort of talk about the money issues. Yes,
And
Ann.
I guess apart from what I'm going to do in the history part, I would like to point out that there were some comments made about the fact that we don't do public outreach. And the current council may not be aware, because this does go back a ways, that when back in the probably 2011, 2012, 2013 timeframe, when I was on the board, I think I was fairly new at that point, we did look at the urban renewal plan, which had been established in 2006, which does provide a vision for how the area should develop, and decided that it needed to be updated. And so we hired, I believe, NES to do an updated urban renewal land use plan, I think is what we called it. And we then we spent probably 6-8 months in a public process with the community to look at the land use plan that we had updated. There is currently on the city's website under the URA page, I think it's a 165-page document that details all of the public process that we went through to give feedback on this updated land use plan. And that's the plan that we as fiduciary board members for the URA have an obligation to continue to pursue. So I think there's just a lack of probably understanding on the part of some of the council members of how we have reached out to the public.
Yes, Alan, and then John.
Yeah, I just to clarify regarding the pot taxes, if we were to get the entire increment currently, it would be less than 25% of the net, because there's a 10% city part that is not part of the URA, and there's a kickback from the state. So it's about 17%, and 3.9 is less than 25%. So I just want to clarify that. And yeah, in the earlier years, it was a smaller number, but even so, because of the the takebacks and all that. But the other thing I just, my take on the public outreach, I feel like we could have done a much better job with the LaFun property. I went back and looked at it, and there was no public awareness of what was going to happen until 48 hours before the meeting where the decision was made. And I think that was a misstep. I think it would have been better to have a little more visibility. It didn't feel like there was a lot of opportunity for people to even know what was going on. And I think we could do a better job of that in the future.
Thank you. John?
I just make one quick comment about the land use model is the plan that you're referring to that NES prepared. And this room was filled with people when we had the public process. And there were a lot of both residents and property owners asking questions. I attended that. I worked on that project, so I'm very familiar with it. And there was a very robust process at that point.
Thank you. It occurs to me that because Plan Manitou is due to be updated, that having the URA participate in that in some way or ask specifically that comments about the East Corridor be collected and captured and that we respond to it, perhaps even with an update to our own land use model, if that is appropriate to do, might be in order, because the 10 years has passed. I don't believe that anything in our land use model feels outdated, but 10 years has passed. So continuing to collect input as part of the city's process makes some sense.
Well, I'd make a comment. I think that's a good comment. And we created a land use model. The board created the land use model, and then the city has implemented a new land use code, which does not reflect the land use model's goals and objectives. And so there's a disconnect there, and hopefully that would be resolved in Plan Manitou in some form or another.
Thank you. Any other comments about the work session itself? Anne, I'll ask you to talk about the history of the finances.
Certainly. And I think I'd like to start by just reiterating, and I think our history will show that when the city has a legitimate need and they come to us and we have the available resources and can continue to pursue the land use plan, the urban renewal plan implementation that we are required as board members to pursue, we have always responded positively and will in the future. I am absolutely certain. The first time that the city came to us and needed our help in addressing a funding shortfall was when the COG very unexpectedly shut down in, I think, 2017. And Ken URA, who was the mayor at the time, came to us and asked us if we would agree to have them withhold the transfer of the sales tax TIF to us for 18 months. And we together, the two bodies, agreed that that was appropriate. We crafted an IGA that laid out the specifics of that agreement, and the city did withhold transfer of funds to us for 18 months, which probably amounted to about $2 million. At the time that they asked us, we had a fairly significant fund balance. My recollection would be it might have been bigger than the general fund balance. So we had sufficient resources to accommodate that request while we continued to pursue our required objectives with the urban renewal plan. A request was made again in 2020 with the COVID pandemic. And while I didn't look back and calculate how much, but our fund balance, I'm sure, had begun to drop at that time because we were doing the Becker's Bridge project. But the city asked us in December, or whenever it was, I suppose it was spring of 2020, if they could withhold the TIF again. They wanted to, because they had not transmitted December of 2019, the period was going to be 13 months. We again, by IGA, collectively agreed that that was an appropriate request, and they withheld those funds for 13 months. At the end, we looked back and agreed that the city, for a variety of reasons, probably didn't have the need that they thought they were going to have because of the COVID pandemic, and they returned half of those funds to us. So the amount that they withheld was probably in the $800,000 range. And I think it's instructive that, again, when there is a reasonable need on the part of the city, and we have the ability to continue to operate while giving up funds, we have always done that. Currently, as Councilmember Shada had indicated, our July financial statements show that we have cash in the bank of $875,000. At the end of August, that had dropped to about $855,000. Since we have received the majority of the revenue we're going to receive from property tax, which is the only revenue we're currently receiving, that fund balance will continue to decline as we continue to meet our obligations for the remainder of 2023. I would point out that we have at least 3 obligations I'm aware of. One is the Christmas lighting contract that's just been, I think, provided to us for $35,000. We had agreed to provide a $10,000 amount to the city for the DDA project, which is in process. And I have asked Becca to invoice us for that. And she has yet to invoice us for the audit expenses, which have generally been for the 2022 audit, which have generally been in the $1,600 range. So we know that those obligations are coming forward. We also have reason to believe that there will be requests under our kind of revamped facade improvement grant program that we're out making sure that the owners in the URA understand that it exists and is available to be used, that there could be additional obligations under that program. The budget shows that we would expect to have by year end $418,000 in cash. We over budget routinely, so my guess is it will be probably in the $500,000 to $600,000 range. But those are the funds that, as long as council continues to withhold the sales tax TIF, those are the funds in combination with the annual property tax revenue, which is probably in the $130,000 to $150,000 range, that we will have to use ongoing as we attempt to, again, continue to meet our obligations to incent redevelopment and improvement in the URA. I did look at the amended 2023 budget for the city. And in that budget, they, even though at the end of, maybe just step back a minute, at the end of 2022, they had a fund balance, an undesignated fund balance, unrestricted, in the range of $8 million. And they went through a long process in February with council to identify capital projects that they would take funds from that undesignated fund balance to fund. And my recollection is that there were about $3.5 million identified and moved over, not to the capital improvement fund balance, but actually shown as budgeted expenditures for 2023, budgeted capital expenditures. So on a recent email to Becca, she did indicate that currently their records show that the undesignated unrestricted fund balance for the general fund is $6.5 million. They currently have $10.4 million budgeted as capital outlays for 2023 that obviously there are funds available to cover. So there are significant resources available in the city, I think, for the projects that they've currently identified. If you look at, if you did kind of an apples to apples comparison as to come up with, as the Councilman Shada did, the cash available to the entity. And it's harder to see that because the city, for whatever reason, does not monthly post balance sheet information. They monthly post very detailed revenue and expenditure reports, but I couldn't find balance sheet information. So I went back to the 2022 audit. And the audit shows as what you always see in an audit, the top line under assets is cash and investments. And the audit shows $11.6 million in cash and investments for the governmental funds, which is basically the general fund. About 7 million for the enterprise. So a combined total of almost $19 million in cash and investments at year end that was available to the city. Now, clearly, unlike the URA, which has a very simple balance sheet, we don't have debt, we don't have other liabilities. The city is much more complex. So it's hard to just look at the cash available and come to a good sense of what they have available to spend. The undesignated fund balance is the best indicator of that, which is again, currently $6.5 million estimate for year end.
Alan,
And we're both, I have two brief questions. We're both IGA agreements. They were actually structured where we agreed to allow the city to withhold payments that they had previously given to us. It's not that.
No,
No,
we
they weren't?
mutually agreed for them to withhold future transfers of sales tax
Right.
tip.
But we never actually wrote them a check
Oh, no. They just withheld.
because that would have been in violation of our fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah, we,
I
yes.
believe. Secondly, what are on an annual basis, you say we have about 3 or 4 projects that we're obligated to fund?
Right.
And those were
For the
about,
rest of the
those
year.
were about how much per year?
Well, for the rest of this year, it's like under 50,000 that I can identify
Okay, but we-
specifically.
But we need to look to the end of the URA and figure out what that number is.
Yeah, and I haven't looked to the end of the URA. I'm looking at our 2023 budget.
Right, but I think
Right.
if we're having ongoing obligations, we should always have the funds to meet those obligations.
Yeah, and of course, that would be like a 5-year capital plan sort of
Right.
exercise because we are getting
Yeah, I think we're getting
annually
close to the end.
property tax
Right,
revenues.
right.
And while we know what the property tax revenues are for 2023, we all know that there were very significant changes in assessed value increases
Yeah.
in the last 2-year reappraisal. And so I have yet to be able to come up with a good estimate of property tax for 2024. What I run a couple of metro districts and what the county assessor said to our districts and everybody else when they sent them the preliminary assessed value for 2024 is that there is a ballot measure that's going to be on the November ballot, Proposition HH, that could change things materially. And that they would not be able to provide a final AV estimate until potentially as late as December 29th. When I have to certify a mill levy for my districts by December 15th.
Yeah, December.
So everything is kind of in flux in terms of what the AV and therefore our property tax revenue will be next year. But we would, to do what you suggested, Alan, we would have to make estimates going out to the end of the life of the URA. Becca did that for the discussion with council and came up with an estimate of 1.75 million that the URA would receive in property tax revenue till the end of its life.
Thank you.
and I have a question for you. Of the 6.5 million fund balance that the city seems to have at present, how much of that is represented by the amount of sales tax that they've been withholding from the URA since August of April of 2022? Do you have an idea about that?
I mean, we got for 2022, we got like 350,000 is my recollection. And I think they probably collected in the range of 1.5, 1.6. So what would that be, like 1.1,
Mhm.
1.2 million there. And then Becca, again, in her presentation, and I should have brought that, said how much we would have gotten this year had they not withheld, and I think her estimate was 1.3. Yeah.
So 2.4 million from us in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
Because we haven't received the sales tax entitled to the URA. So so with that information, I want to have a discussion about how we should proceed, what you would like to do.
I can certainly give you my impression. Again, I think were there a crisis in the city where they needed our 500,000 or 600,000 that we would probably be able to give them, I think we would consider whether or not that was a legitimate request. I think given the fact that they have currently $10.4 million budgeted for capital, clearly a large amount of that will carry over to 2024 because a pretty significant amount is for the library and Hiawatha Gardens, neither of which are going to be spending money this year. And if we knew that, I think potentially we could get significant requests for our facade improvement grant, and we may be getting requests from the Martin property. And those are our legitimate mission to be able to finance those with the funds we have. So I think not knowing whether any or how much of the 600,000 or 700,000 we may end up with at year end would be obligated from requests for facade improvement grants or other redevelopment grants. It would not be a reasonable thing for us to do to give up those funds at this point. And again, I think it's not clear that there is a project or a need that isn't already covered in the city, that those funds are necessary to be used.
I just
Yes.
have a question, regarding our balance, it's kind of mingled between property tax and sales tax, is a source of our balance. And if I were like on the library board and I saw my commitment to the URA being siphoned into the general fund, it seems to me like that would be I don't understand how that, it seems like there's a legality issue there.
There could be, yeah, I don't either. I'm not sure that's ever occurred in any URA where they were requested to return funds that they had already received. Clearly, we know under state statute, were we to be dissolved and there were remaining funds, they would go back to the taxing entities and there would have to be a process, which would be a really interesting process to try to figure out who those belong to.
Yeah,
But that's a good point.
yeah, I mean, it seems like the sales tax is a different
Right.
issue. And it, I was sitting there after the meeting Tuesday thinking like, well, how would we decide
How would
which part of the 870
Yeah.
is sales tax generated and which is property tax? So
Yeah.
it just seems like it's pretty convoluted and
Very.
needs some legal analysis to even understand if it would be possible.
Right. I mean, what was suggested in the council meeting, and of course, we don't have access to the legal memo that Jeff produced, but what was clearly stated in council meeting is that Jeff had said that they cannot legally just take our fund balance. And there's probably good reasons for that.
Yes, I would find it very difficult to spend our existing fund balance on anything other than legitimate projects inside the URA. I think that would be a violation of our charter. So I just fundamentally have a really hard time with that and don't think I need a legal opinion to help me make up my mind. frankly.
Right, and maybe I just weigh in one more thing and point out that this URA was set up unlike any URA in the state of Colorado. In that when it was set up, the ordinance very clearly provides that the TIF sales tax revenue only comes to us by appropriation of the city. So they actually keep the money and they have to make an appropriation to send it to us. No other URA operates that way. And the logic, I believe, when the council did that in 2006, that says that council will make a decision when we present our plan, which has been our budget, our annual budget to them, that in effect, make a decision about whether or not to transmit that sales tax TIF. The theory, I believe, was that council would look at their priorities, the projects they needed to do. They would look at what we said we were going to do, and they would make a judgment as to which was the higher priority. And they didn't often, I think, in a straightforward way do that until 2017.
Yes, John.
Well, our item here on the agenda is discussion of the work session, but I think we have two issues that probably need consideration. One is the request to return money, and that's one discussion. And the other discussion is input into a proposed IGA, which the talking points, I assume, will be drafted in a relatively short period of time. So to me, there's two buckets that we need to discuss.
Any thoughts about either of those?
I think if we're going to get involved in drafting an IGA, it certainly has to take into account our obligations till the termination of the URA, which that was not done in the past. That's clearly appropriate now, I believe.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yeah, I look at the last 2 years as, it's like a real stressful relationship. And I've wondered of ways to make it work better. And where this sort of tension started was obviously we made a decision on the LaFond property to basically spend what for that year was about 25% of the general fund equivalent. And I'm not judging whether that was a good decision or not. What I'm feeling is like we're a small community and we talk about the city and we talk about us but in reality, we're all part of the community, and possibly a way going forward that would keep us able to do projects and possibly like the Dillon or who knows where, would be to come up with a better power sharing agreement. Right now, like in 2022, obviously there was discord and disagreement with the city, and we went ahead and did it despite. And what if we came up with an IGA where there was mutual ability to veto, so that, we'd still be able to propose stuff and pitch it, and we could pitch it with council and get to a consensus for the community. And I think that's where there's a lot of lack of harmony between our two entities. And to me, it doesn't seem awful, that, if there was some give and take rather than, it was pretty arbitrary. We said, no, we're going to do it. The mayor came and said, please don't do it. Some people on council didn't like it. And yeah, we're always subject to the political whims of whatever the city council is, but that could be a way to make it work more harmoniously.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Yes,
guess
Ann.
I hear what you're saying, Alan, but I think the perspective that sometimes I don't think council has is the URA is a separate, independent political body set up under state statute. The board is populated by council, by mayor designation, council concurrence. And certainly the understanding, I think, that should exist is when the council creates the Urban Renewal Authority Board, they have the authority to implement the urban renewal plan. And that typically, I don't think councils do look over the shoulders of the Urban Renewal Authority boards. And I don't think most of them would want to. I think that's a task, a mission given to an independent body that again is people populated by the mayor and with the consent of council. So I'm not sure how that would actually work. I mean, there obviously is a provision in state statute where council can step in and become the board. It requires a vote of the people, and that's certainly an option. Not one I would propose that makes much sense, but it's an option.
Just to clarify, you're saying to change the composition of the board, it would require a vote of the people.
For council to step in and become
Right.
the board.
Okay, I'm not
to
proposing.
change the composition. I mean, anytime there's a vacancy or anytime somebody comes to the mayor and says, because under the old statute, we could have up to 13, is it 11 or 13 members? And so we could still add members, and somebody could go to the mayor and say, I'm interested in being in the URA board. He would decide if they're an appropriate candidate. And if he thought they were, he would suggest that to council, and they would put another board member on the URA. If they want to en masse become the URA board, that requires a vote of the people, a
Okay.
ballot. Maybe.
Yeah, but to do some other, I've looked at the URA or the state law too, and I don't see anything that says the two entities could not come up with a different arrangement in terms of.
So I agree with you in theory, Alan, that would be possible to do, but here's the rub. That's not the way development works in our country. Private property owners have a right to develop their property the way they want to within the confines of the law. The reason that URAs are separate from city councils is that city councils have a regulatory function to implement the land use plan and to uphold other codes. They cannot also be the ones to necessarily do development deals. URAs serve as an intermediary between private developers and the public entity, the public regulatory body. So we're empowered to do development deals. That's what the LaFun agreement was. We could not divulge any of the details about the plan until we were ready to talk about it. It's one of the confidentiality requirements of doing development in our country and particularly in our state. So the legislature set up urban renewal authorities to serve in this very special way with special protections guiding how development would occur so that it would occur in accordance with community standards and values and with the local land use. It is our job to do this. And, there are all sorts of ways that the city of Manitou Springs could undo our job. Fundamentally, I don't believe that that's in the best interests of the community. And because there are still really legitimate reasons why we should exist, not the least of which is we now have a new property under contract. We have another one up for sale. We have several others that are in play. Finally, we have development along the boulevard, and a lot of that is because of the public investments we made in the West Side Avenue project and all the other infrastructure. I think this issue has come to a head for two reasons. Number one, there's a pot tax, which none of us signed up to say, let's have a pot tax. We're just the recipients of it. That puts us in this difficult position of having funds that we didn't generate or agree to generate. They just landed in our lap. That's the point at which we should have done an IGA to talk about how this new revenue source should be distributed appropriately in Manitou. I think we have the opportunity to do that now and for the lifetime of the URA, as Alan Gregory is pointing to, right? To take our obligations into consideration and talk about whether or not a different distribution of the future sales tax revenues would be appropriate, or how we would mutually agree in the future to divide up those sales tax revenues, what the process would be, because this process frankly sucks. That's my technical term for it. This sucks. I don't want to operate this way. We can't tell developers that we have their backs. We can't have a better relationship with the city council. We're just stuck. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is I believe that this board has been incredibly responsive to community values and standards and the mission that we have. In fact, I think we've been the most responsible of most boards and commissions in the city of Manitou. I think we've listened carefully. I think we've made thoughtful decisions. I've been really proud of the work that we've done up to and including the LaFund deal. I still think it's in the best interest of the city, but it's difficult to see that if you don't understand how economic development works and in our region, particularly, or in our country. And I think that's the other part of the disconnect, is that the minute we put on our redevelopment hats, nervous and more nervous and more nervous and more nervous because they fundamentally don't understand it. If there is a place at which we need to have a meeting of the minds and the hearts and agree about how we're going to move forward. I don't see that happening today. I am hopeful that perhaps in a more civil discussion about an IGA and what it might look like, we could come to agreement about things like how future funds should be spent, how we would bring a development agreement, keeping private property owner interests for confidentiality in mind, how we would bring a development agreement in the future forward to the city for consideration, things like that. I don't think that an IGA would be, as Julie Wolf said, a kumbaya document. That's what she said at the work session on Tuesday, a way to play nice together. I think it would be a very, very important document that would help us set us up to be successful for the next 8 years. That's where I'm at.
And one thing that I would like to see in an IGA, and I've written this down and I'll put it on the table now, is that some requirement that the city, whenever they take any sort of action in the urban renewal area, consult with us. They consult with other agencies on multitude of projects, but and I list this Martin property sale of or purchase of the open space parcel. There's value to the open space of having that easement. That's access to it in another direction. It's a simple add-on and it's an easy point in time to make the ask. Here they're going to make a sale. They're going to fund the Martin estate, and it's an easy ask. And the Martins were already considering it anyhow. So why not ask us about that and make an improvement in the community that benefits everybody? It's a simple solution.
Thank you. Any other comments?
So I would think we need a motion on the request to transfer funds to the city. And I would move that we respectfully decline given the obligations we perceive we have to carry out our mission as the Urban Renewal Authority Board.
Second.
Jim, there's a motion by Ann and a second by Farley. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. How about giving direction to Jim about an IGA? Because my expectation is that he's the one who will be requested from Denise to weigh in about this.
Well, it seems like we ought to wait and see what staff comes back with in terms of the questions that they were to ask and research. And then maybe we can have this discussion at the next meeting.
I'm hearing Ann say agree. Alan?
I agree. I just wanted, if we're finished with that, I just wanted to challenge you on one thing. You made the statement that this board is the most responsible of all the boards and commissions. And I have to respectfully disagree with you. I think we have many very responsible boards, and I would not elevate this board above the Planning Commission or the OSAC or PARA or HPC. All of us are citizens, and we represent all of the community, not just Ward 2, which this board is mostly. And we have lots of very dedicated citizens, and I think we're all very responsible.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I characterized it that way. That was not my intent. My intent was to say, because I personally feel like we have been under a lot of scrutiny lately. And I believe that we have not only done our jobs, but done them very well. I absolutely agree with you that the lion's shares of boards and committees in Manitou are very well run and do their jobs admirably. Unfortunately, sort of toiling away without much limelight or fanfare or anything like that. Perhaps because of the scrutiny, I'm particularly sensitive to the comments that have been made about our behavior, and it makes me appear arrogant about our work, and I don't want to characterize it that way. I'm not feeling arrogant about it. I'm feeling the need to say out loud that I think we do a good job. So thank you. Yes, John.
Before we leave this topic, I just want to make one other comment, and then that is to thank Councilman Shada for attending our meeting. I think other than Nancy Fortune, who is our council liaison person, I think he's the only person that's attended a meeting since I have been on the board. Perhaps as some of you know, I've offered to city council members to walk the URA with them and basically give them my insights as a planner, which if I still in business, I would have charged $8,000 to $10,000 per property to do that, and offering it for free. One person Nancy Fortune has taken up that offer. None others have. So I think it's hard for council to understand what's going on in the district if they don't pay attention to it. And thank you, Councilman Shada, for attending.
Thank you. Anything else about this topic? Yes, Marcy.
Well, I can't resist in saying that I think over the years since I was involved in the beginning of it, as Ann was, and unfortunately, this particular board did get overlooked by various councils and various mayors, because it seemed for a long time, as you all recall, we didn't have any money. no money, no action. Nobody had any problems with that. They had problems with how we, old man, looking at that area down there, we all had problems with that, but there were no solutions. So it just stayed still. It just remained still. So I think there is something to say about government. The government has a responsibility, and boards have a responsibility as well. If you're on a board, you need to come to the meetings. You see things not happening. You need to have some discussion about why, etc. I won't go into that, but I think that's a lot of the problem with our difficulty now. Now we have money and have had money now for a few years. And it looks very, very attractive, obviously, for anybody who deals with this little city, that money be spent, and everybody has different ideas of how it should. But I would just say that has been a fundamental issue with this community and with this board, is that there was a lack of oversight. And I put myself in that category, because if everything's going smoothly and the board wasn't coming to the council with any major complaints, we moved on to the ones that did have complaints and concerns. So I would just point that out.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Let's move on. And let's go back to the top of the agenda and do the approval of the August 18th minutes. If there are no comments or questions, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So move.
Moved by Alan Delwich and second by Barb Winter. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And the financial reports for July.
So you have the July financial statements. Again, the balance sheet shows we have with cash with the county treasurer, we will have 875,000 in our bank account. Page 3 shows our activity compared to the annual budget. And we have the budget actually showed 115,000, the adopted budget for property tax revenue. We know that's actually a bit over 130,000. We've collected 118, almost 19,000 of that. So there's a little bit left to collect there. Our expenses have generally been, the predominant expenses have been our payments to Paragon for the remaining demolition of the LaFun, which show under capital expenditures. And then typical expenditures for the director's salary, legal services, some consulting, which would be Madwoman, and accounting, and some snow removal. So as we continue on, I think I have seen the August bank statement. And again, we've dropped to about 855,000. That will continue to decline. And as I've indicated to Debbie, I think it's important that Jim, if he's still listening, continue to reach out to the property owners in the URA to make them aware of the fact that we have this revamped, improved, increased facade improvement grant program that we would like them to see if they could take advantage of, because I think that in and of itself could improve the look of the URA. Thank you.
Before we accept the financial reports for the month, I'd also like to make mention and thank Anne for providing the general ledger. Year to date, she did send that to Jim, and Jim made it available to us earlier this week. So I'm assuming that that's something that we'll do now on a regular basis going forward, or maybe a quarterly basis
The
or
board
something.
would like that. I mean, that's always, as you asked the question, for some reason, it didn't occur to me to say last month that we can just run a general ledger report. We can always have Holting run that. So I guess I seek board direction on, do you want that every month, every quarter?
At least quarterly.
Quarterly.
And I mean,
Quarterly. Yeah.
I can read it more frequently, but quarterly would be able to keep
Great.
up it. Offline, I have a lot of questions for you just to understand it better, but
Oh, okay,
I don't want to waste half an hour of this board's time.
great. So I'll ask Colting to do it just routinely every quarter.
Great.
Great.
Great. And Alan, thank you. Some of us like to dive deeper than others in those kinds of matters. So we'll leave it to you to get together with Ann and get your questions addressed. And if there's something that you think we need to be aware of, let us know.
It's more just ignorance and wanting to remove some of it.
Thank you. With that, I'll take a motion to accept the financial reports for July. Alan Gregory moves, John Maynard second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay, so on to yes, Barb.
Just as a side note, I saw Carol Campbell this week, just socially, some other activities. And our little iteration of sending out our annual plan through the journal. She said, and I think we finally all got it, correct? She said we weren't charged on that last iteration or cycle. So I don't know how much more costs will be coming through. I just thought I would add that to the record.
Thank you. And that's the next item on our agenda, is to discuss the communication plan. When we teed this issue up in the springtime, it's been a long time ago, maybe April. We had asked Carol to prepare a new marketing and communication plan for us, which she did. And at that time, what we decided to do was to move forward with the annual report, which she has been working on, but we have not given her other direction. She was at our meeting last time and we discussed about, we talked about our social media presence. But really that was about it. And what we said at that time was we wanted some time to talk amongst ourselves about how to move forward with our work with Carol. So with that, I'd entertain comments, conversation, questions about how we should move forward with Carol and a marketing plan. Yes, Barb.
Maybe somebody can refresh me how many years she may have supported our initiatives. And in that regard, I think it's a few cycles, at least on our more recent watch, those of us that are newer. I think it would be appropriate to put that out to bid. I mean, I just think that's good business practice.
I don't have the answer to that. I know that when Jim came on board, he told, the way he tells me the story is that that Carol was already on board and Jim came on board in 2019.
That's correct.
2019? Yeah.
I believe it's been since 2016.
2016 that Carol's been our marketing person. I think so.
At least she may have done the public outreach on the land use plan, which was 2014.
Oh,
So it's been a significant length of time. Yeah.
close to 10 years is the recollection that Carol's been doing this work for us.
You know, and Ann and I restructured Carol's contract. What was that, in 2020, I believe, Ann? We reduced the amount that she was getting paid on a monthly basis fairly significantly. But it might be time to revisit that again.
Okay. Farley?
I was just going to say, I'm in favor of taking it out to bid again.
So am I, and I'd like to, I guess, those who propose, if they would draft how they would handle our needs, that may give us some good ideas.
I think this deserves some attention from us because I was a bit dismayed to hear about the non-agreement with regards to certain facts with regards to the Urban Renewal Authority. I'm not sure we can ever change that, but I think we want to be sure that we're on record defending what we've done. I mean,
Yes.
we've been extraordinarily conservative. I mean, we could have been out there borrowing money like crazy
Yes.
and buying properties ourselves. I mean, we've taken a very cautious, conservative approach to this, which we all thought for the longest time was in the spirit of Manitou.
Right.
So in that regard, I mean, I'm kind of the outsider, but I think it's been a good board. I think it's been very responsible. I don't know. Let's just figure out if somebody can help us.
Thank you. Yes, Barb.
So perhaps Debbie, Jim could bring forward our requirements that we have currently with Carol. And then maybe even from some of our own discussions here in our notes, we can see the pieces that are lacking or need emphasis. And then maybe we have our own little work session and really just hammer out that piece, because I think it warrants appropriate attention on messaging broadly.
Thank you. Does that sound like a good way to proceed to all of you? I like that idea, Barb, particularly because I've always questioned why we have the social media strategy that we have, because it's not our job to just repost things by the city of Manitou Springs. I think it gives a false impression of who we are and what we do. So I would like to see not only a competitive process to figure out who should be helping us in this regard going forward, but I'd also like to see us have a more thorough discussion about why we need to, who is and why, and what that message would be, so that we could then engage somebody to do the appropriate work, the work that we need today, which is not the same as the work that we needed in the past. Yes, Farley.
I think a lot about why it has not been working, and part of it, we've just been sort of letting it go.
Yes,
Right, because we
absolutely.
didn't know what to do. And marketing it's a skill, and it's a skill a lot of us don't have. So we didn't even know how to give good direction.
Yes.
But I do think that when I look at the situation and how to tell the story of the URA to the community, I really believe that whoever we end up going with is actually going to have to attend our meetings every single month. And that takes a particular type of person as well, because we're not like a sexy board, right? So, but I believe that is the key, is to really understand what we do. And you have to sit here and listen and read the packet and understand. And I think that would inform how they communicate to the community on our behalf. And that is what we have never had, really.
Thank you. Any other comments, suggestions? So our direction to Jim is bring us Carol's contract. Let us know what the terms and conditions are. And would you like to have this conversation at our next meeting, or would you like to have a special work session just to discuss this?
I feel comfortable discussing it within a regular meeting,
Okay,
as long as we have all the information,
okay,
which is basically Carol's contract. And then whatever thoughts we have on.
terrific.
So perhaps Debbie, that could be emailed to us ahead of time.
Yes,
And then we could be coming to the meeting prepared with our own thoughts of changes and additions of concept. And then we could use our time judiciously and really drilling down to it without rehashing everything.
terrific. Okay,
It would help me, because I still end up with Jim's emails in my junk. I just found the balance sheet since you mentioned it. If somebody's, yeah, I never look at there. If somebody acknowledges receipt, then I'll know to look at it. That would be helpful to me.
Thank you. Yes, we can do that. Jim, are you still here? Are you capturing all of this?
I am still here. I've got a few more minutes left before I gotta go. So yeah, I got the direction and we'll get that information out to the board as soon as I can.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay, so we're done with that item. We're on to Nancy Fortune's report as our city council liaison, but she is traveling today. So could not join us. I had a brief talk with her and she just assured me that there wasn't anything pressing that the council has done or that's gone on in the city in the last month that required our attention or knowledge. So she's going to do a 2-month report when she's with us again in October. Any other items of other business? I just have one, and that is that there are 2 upcoming sessions for us to meet city council candidates and mayoral candidates. The first one is the Chamber of Commerce session, which I think is next Wednesday. Farley, do you have the details about that one? Can you tell us about that one?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I spaced that out. Yes, so the chamber is holding a candidate forum, business focused candidate forum on the 20th at 5:30 at the Cliff House. It'll be 30 minutes of sort of mingling, chatting, and then we have invited all the candidates and the incumbents to join. And we're going to be working with the League of Women Voters for a structure. And we're going to take direction from them on the best way to formulate questions, whether or not people are going to throw questions in a bucket, or if we're going to have some questions already prepared from the Chamber of Commerce board. So we're working on that right now. Right. But yes, 5:30, and I believe it starts at the Red Mountain Grill. And then we'll be going to the larger, I don't know if we're going to end up in the ballroom, but we're expecting 60 to 70 people. I think we have 45 confirmed at this point.
Okay. And can the public attend? Can
Yes.
we come?
Yes, thank you. Yes, the public is welcome to attend. However, we would like you to call the chamber and just tell them that you're coming or how many people are coming, because it affects the food that the Cliff House will be providing.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And then there's another session in October, but I can't remember the details about that one.
That's it.
Of October.
The 20th.
You should know.
The 19th.
The 19th,
Yeah.
October 19th. And is that the Pikes Peak Bulletin one? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's going to be at the Briarhurst. And I believe Ralph Broughton is the moderator.
Okay. Terrific. So 2 opportunities to meet the council candidates. There's a large slate. So I would encourage you to go if you can and meet them and learn more. I've met a couple of them now, of the candidates running for the at-large positions, and would like to meet the others. Any other items of other business? Jim, anything else on your mind?
Not no, really, other than I think we probably want to have some legal advice when we start entering into looking at this IGA, and I'd like your permission to draft David's help.
Yes, I would say if you are requested by the city to get engaged in that conversation, that makes sense to me that David be involved as well. I think what I heard at the meeting was that Jeff will be asked at this point. from as the city's legal counsel to weigh in on a potential IGA. I don't know that they'll reach out to us quite yet, but if they do, I'm seeing heads nodding around this table that that you should have David involved as well.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. I'm gonna call for adjourning at 10 on the dot. Motion to adjourn. Moved by John Maynard, second by Barb Winters. All those in favor say aye. Aye. No opposition to that. Jim, good luck moving in.
Yeah, I gotta go meet the movers right now. Pretty exciting.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thanks.
All right, see ya.